Good evening, everyone. It is great to be back together. Although it sounds like from the beginning we should have just gone to a bar and we could have just made fun of each other for a few hours, but we can't do that right now. So we'll gather virtually and talk about some important business. We will start by doing some quick introductions from Chair Garvey and myself, and then we probably should go around the room or virtual room, because we do have some new people that have not been involved in this discussion in the past. And so I think it would be good to put faces and names on everyone. So why don't we'll do our council first, and then our staff folks. The city manager will have his staff folks, and then Libby, you want to do your board, and then your folks as well?
I'll follow your lead. I'll let the manager do his folks, because I'm not actually sure who all's here. Go ahead.
Yep. No, we can do it that way. So from our side, I'm the mayor, Justin Wilson. Elizabeth, you want to go next?
I'm Elizabeth Bennett Parker.
Vice Mayor. All right. Let's go. Dell, you want to go next?
Dell Pepper, City
right.
Council.
All right. Who else we got here? Let's continue along here. John?
John Chapman.
Amy?
Amy Jackson, Council.
Mo? Mo, where are you?
Good evening, y'all. Faculty, City Council. I'm here. You guys can't see me. Like, I've been here since the joke started.
All right, Kanik, you're last.
Everybody, Kanik Aguirre, Alexandria.
All right, and then Mr. Jenks, you want to go with the staff folks, staff introductions?
Sure. Mark Jenks, City Manager. Joanne Anderson, City Attorney. Deborah Collins, Deputy City Manager. And Mike Mackey, Director of the Court Service Unit. And our City Clerk, I see, is here. There may be a few more people whose names and pictures I cannot see or hear, and they should announce themselves on the city staff side.
Okay. Chair Garvey, you want to go on your side now?
Sure. All right. Thank you, Mayor. Libby Garvey, I'm chair of the Arlington County Board, and I've got my 4 colleagues with me, and I'll start in reverse order of seniority with our newest member, Takis. Want to introduce yourself?
He's on mute.
Yeah, I think so. You got to unmute yourself.
We had him before. We heard him.
We did. All right. I'm going to skip, just like we do with our resident, I'm going to skip over and come back to you. I'll go to Matt DeFerranti. Matt.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about the video, but Matt DeFerranti, County Board Member.
Great. Katie?
Good evening. This is County Board Member Katie Crystal.
Good evening. This is Christian Dorsey, County Board Member and also liaison to the Juvenile Detention Center.
Exactly. And Takis, you want to try again? Takis Karantonis was with us a few minutes ago. We think he's still here, but I think we could go ahead and Takis, because we're not hearing you. We'll go ahead.
Takis Karantonis, County Board Member.
There we go.
With the bandwidth here, so I will try to fix them, but I can hear you. Thank you.
There we are.
Excellent. We're good to go. And then Mark Schwartz is our county manager. And Mark, I'll ask you to introduce the staff.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Joining us this evening from Arlington, we have our County Board Clerk, Kendra Jacobs, County Attorney, Steve McIsaac, Deputy County Manager, Michelle Cowan, and Arlington Juvenile Domestic Relations Court Services Director, Earl Conklin.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. All right, back over to you, Mayor.
All right, very good. So I don't have a long introduction. I'll just be very brief. You know, the last time we all got together, we were talking about opportunities for new collaboration, for ways that we could collaborate on a variety of some of our new emergent challenges in the 2 communities. This time, I think we're talking about an area where there's been decades of historic collaboration, and how we look forward on that collaboration and figure out what the best way to provide these services are in the future. You know, the good news for us is we are having this conversation because of a lot of success. We're having this conversation because we have lower crime, and so we have less situations where we have any need to have youth detained. We're having this conversation because we have more alternatives to detention in both communities. so that we have opportunities for youth who have offended to be in situations that are not secure detention like this facility. And this is obviously not a conversation that is only ours. This is something that's happening all over the Commonwealth and really all over the country as a declining usage of these kind of facilities continues. The other good news, and I think the success that we can celebrate, is this is a great facility. This is a well-run facility that provides good services to our communities and to our youth and families in our community. And so I think we enter into this conversation from a position of strength and one that you have two bodies and our partners in Falls Church looking for the best way to provide these services to our communities in the future. And that's why we brought in our consultant partners, and we're going to hear from them in a little bit about what they found. And then hopefully the two bodies can give some good direction going forward about how we want our staffs to collaborate to map this out for the future. So that's all I have to say.
That sounds great. Thank you. Well, I have all my colleagues here and our staff. Thank you so much to the City of Alexandria for hosting. And as you know, Mayor Wilson mentioned, we've got a long-standing collaboration on a lot of areas: economic development, transportation, infrastructure, housing was a major one we came back together to talk about the last time. And so it's great to be here with you, albeit virtually. I'm sorry our friends from Falls Church City couldn't join us, but they have a very small stake in this particular facility, and the scheduling got so tough that they decided to just let us go ahead and do this, just the two of us jurisdictions at the moment. So obviously there is a lot of good news, and that's part of what makes this meeting kind of complex to figure out. We've got something that's pretty good. But obviously we've got some empty space in there, which we're going to hear about, because we've been doing such a good job of deterring, getting young people not into the detention facility, but into better treatment. And I think we all share the goal that detention should always be the last resort. And I'm glad we're doing a pretty good job of making that the case. Our primary focus obviously is to really make sure that we have the best continuum of care for these youth who are really trauma impacted by the time they come to here. And that can be therapeutic intervention, substance and mental health counseling, life skills training, education, and more. So above all, what we want to do, of course, is also, I think, both of our communities trying to address the fact that it is our young people of color who are disproportionately affected by this detention facility. And we would like to do away with those disproportionalities and continue to actually lower the number of young people there. But there will, I think, always be a need for this facility or something like it. And that's why we're here. So I know both of our communities are very interested in this. I know the consultant is going to be giving us a presentation, and I believe doing a presentation later to our public and our communities who are concerned about this issue. So for those of you listening, there will be a presentation, an opportunity for you to talk directly with the consultant as well. And so I think with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Wilson.
Okay, and I'm going to immediately turn it over to Alexandria's Court Service Unit Director, Mike Mackey.
Okay.
Mike, you're up.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Wilson, members of council, Chair Garvey, members of the board, managers, staff, and guests. I am Mike Mackey, Court Service Unit Director for Alexandria and current member of the Detention Commission. I'd like to introduce members of the Studies Project Team, Mr. Earl Conklin, Court Service Unit Director for Arlington Falls Church and member of the Commission, and Ms. Janitha McNair, Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center. And on their behalf, I would just like to add to what the mayor and chair offered to us by means of context. And I'm pleased also to share that indeed over the last decade, there has been an approximately 50 to 70% decline in the use of secure detention in Alexandria, Arlington, and Falls Church. And as the mayor and chair mentioned, the decline is the result of a variety of factors: reduced juvenile crime, increased use of detention alternatives and programs, and changes in juvenile justice and court practices. However, the daily costs of placements at the center have increased as a result of the lower utilization and the fixed costs associated with operating a facility. Given these matters, the three jurisdictions that jointly operate the center requested the study, which examined two critical questions. What are the costs and benefits of purchasing juvenile detention services from another jurisdiction in the region if available? And what strategies are available for operating the center with greater efficiency and effectiveness? An RFP was advertised in December 2018, and the Moss Group was awarded the contract and began the study in July 2019. And as was mentioned, the purpose of this meeting is to provide this report this evening and for your consideration to determine next steps. Thank you. And Mayor and Chair, the Moss Group is ready when you are prepared. And I would say Dr. Wilkinson is prepared to take over from the Moss Group when you're ready.
Yep, let's do it. Let's go. Okay. Dr. Wilkinson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Board Chair Garvey. And greetings to all the elected and public officials that are representing Northern Virginia on this project, and the two jurisdictions present, but I know there are three jurisdictions involved. So on behalf of the Moss Group, headquartered, I guess across two rivers, maybe the Potomac and the Anacostia in Washington, D.C., we're pleased to join you for this event. My name is Reggie Wilkinson. I have been involved with criminal justice work for 48 years. I retired from Ohio State government in 2006, where I served as director of the State Department of Corrections, but worked with the agency for 33 years and was director for over 15 years. I'm a past president of the American Correctional Association, which, by the way, is headquartered in Alexandria, as well as the Corrections Leaders Association. I've been affiliated with the Moss Group almost since the beginning, and I had my own group called Connecting the Dots. Joining me for the presentation today are two esteemed colleagues. You'll see their names on the screen. The first is Wayne Liddell, who served as director of Berrien County Juvenile Center in Michigan for 15 years. He's worked in a variety of other professional capacities during his 35-year juvenile justice career in state, county, and privately operated detention, corrections, and residential treatment facilities. That was a mouthful. He is a past president of both the Michigan Juvenile Detention Association, the National Juvenile Detention Association, and he's a proud graduate of Michigan State University. Next is Chris Eichenlaub, we call him Ike, who is also a 35-year experienced justice professional, primarily in adult corrections. He has experience in social science research and is a former deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Since retiring from the federal prison system, he's worked in correctional health care, standards compliance, and criminal justice consulting. He has a bachelor's degree from Gettysburg College and a master's in criminal justice from the University of Maryland. Also on the call today and helping us with some of the technology is Brasan Gradado, who is a Moss Group project director. The president of the company, Andy Moss, may be joining us at some point during the presentation. So as you can see on the screen, the name of the project is Cost Benefit Analysis of the Use of Northern Virginia Regional Detention Center and Alternatives. So we're pleased, to be able to augment some of the comments that many of you have already said and to officially present you with a reduced version of the report and I think a synopsis that will help you better understand our analyses. So the next slide, we will talk a little bit about the background. And you heard Mike say a little bit about why we're doing this, but we will give you some data in just a second. We reviewed, and we'll hear more about the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center operations. No report of this nature is worth its salt unless we talk about the center's, the strengths and challenges that we uncovered. And of course, there's a financial analysis attached to the report. And then we will make some concluding remarks. And should the elected and public officials have questions of the Moss Group, we will be happy to respond. So first, it's probably not a mystery to many of you who have kept up in any way, shape, and form about what's going on with juvenile justice in the United States. But nationally, juveniles are being placed in detention less frequently than has historically been the case. The number of juveniles placed at the center declined significantly over the decades. And if you see the bar graph at the bottom, it represents a 13-year period where 20,092 child care days in 2006 were realized compared to 5,574 just last year. So that is a 72% decrease, and we are seeing, similar decreases across the country. So some of the tasks that were undertaken by the Moss Group are these. We did a historical review and compilation of various and sundry documents that we thought were pertinent to the report, to putting together a report. We did an analysis of national, state, and local best practices, innovations related to juvenile justice and their incarceration. We did an analysis of the existing center's operations and potential efficiencies. We did an evaluation of the potential for further regionalization and juvenile detention services with another jurisdiction. We did a comparative financial and services delivery analysis of the two proposed options to continue, to continued operations for the center as, versus further regionalization. And finally, there was a present, we wanted to make this event today is to present, the final recommendations of the full report, even though I know many of you have seen, the full report previous to today. So a methodology we thought was important to present to you today. It's not a technical methodology, but again, it's a review of the steps that we undertook to make sure that the report was comprehensive and that we gave you what you asked us for. And hopefully it's something that will allow you to make further deliberations about the center in the future. We did a document review, historical information. We collected financial information, and we did an on-site review and a document review of operations at the center. There were observations of the center by juvenile justice and criminal justice professionals, experts, and there were others involved with helping to compile all of that information behind the scenes. So this just wasn't a paper review. Staff were actually observing programs and services as they were taking place in real time. There was a deployment of a survey of probably surveys posted on public websites for all community members to complete. My recall is that there was robust participation by members of the public as a result of these surveys being posted. There was a review and analysis of juvenile justice research and best practices. There were interviews conducted, focus groups held with stakeholders, including center staff, juveniles, family members, elected officials, probably many of you, local and state government officials, judges, attorneys, law enforcement officials, and court officials. And we conducted a series of public meetings in each of the 3 jurisdictions. I was fortunate to participate in those. And as the board chair from Arlington mentioned, we will be conducting another event in November that will be designed to inform the public of our findings. And then I will now turn the next few slides over to Wayne Liddell, and the staff presenting the slides today know the order that they will be presented in. So you'll hear from me again when we talk about conclusions.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Wayne Liddell, and I'm going to go through probably 10 slides and then turn it over to Mr. Eichenlaub. I was the person who did the section on the historical background, and I must say that what I found from the jurisdictions is a host of information that was prepared and disseminated to us by the commission, by the city, by the county, and Falls Church. And one of the things that I really found, and I was listening to the meeting before we came on board, but it's clear that the jurisdictions, Mayor Wilson, Chair Garvey, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Jenks, this isn't something that's normally seen in the field, the kind of commitment to quality services that I've seen in your jurisdiction at the center. So I just want to thank you for all you're doing. Thank the participants who are on this call. And I think you've got a lot to be proud of. I think the mayor and the chair alluded to that, and so did Mr. Mackey. So this is a very positively focused report. I feel good about things that are going on in your jurisdiction. So a little bit of history, and I was collecting all kinds of documents and have stacks of papers in my office. But 1956, everybody knows Alexandria, Arlington County, and Falls Church, as well as Fairfax County, established the Juvenile Detention Commission. And this is, I think, unique to Virginia in terms of having commission-operated facilities. And the commission was established with 7 members from the 4 jurisdictions. The commission owns the building, land, and assets. It also provides operational oversight for the facility. 1958, 30-bed detention facility was opened. And then somewhere in the mid-90s, I think 1994, thereabouts, the facility was expanded to 70 beds. This was a time during the nation's overcrowding in detention was happening. So just like many facilities across the country, the influx of kids into detention was very high, and people went into a building splurge. 1994, about the same time, Fairfax County withdrew from the agreement and built its own facility, leaving 5 members to the commission. So the commission also manages shelter care in the same property. And quite frankly, and I've had some conversations with Mr. Mackey and the Moss Group, this was a little confusing, you know, for us at the Moss Group, how the shelter care really meshed with the detention facility. And what it boils down to, how I understand it, the commission owns the land in which the detention center and shelter care are located. The commission operates the detention center and shelter care, and the commission owns the detention center building and its assets. But the city of Alexandria owns the shelter care building, and the commission leases the shelter care land to the city of Alexandria for $1 per year. It took us a little while to figure out how all that works, but we ended up doing that, and it seems like the process works for kids who need detention care and also shelter care. Next slide, please. We received population statistics and characteristics from the Department of Juvenile Justice. And the info we got was the average age is 16 and a half years, which typically is a little high for detention nationwide. 150 unique individuals committed in fiscal year 2019. And some of those youth did have multiple admissions to detention. So it came up to 223 actual admissions. And as the chair indicated earlier, I believe, the issue of disproportionate minority representation in detention, and it is something that's a national issue. But in this jurisdiction, you had 56.7% African American youth, 38.7 Caucasian, and 4.6 other or unknown. And then the ethnicity statistics, 30.7 Hispanic, and the rest were either non-Hispanic or unknown. 72% of the residents were male, 28% female. Again, that's typical throughout the nation. The female clientele, I think, are starting to become more numerous, but it's still predominantly males. And most common offenses that kids were coming into detention for: probation violation, contempt of court, robbery, assault, larceny, and narcotics. And one of the things that has been happening is the population that we're seeing in detention now is typically a more serious offense charged, and also more mental health issues. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So some of the youngsters coming in are posing more of a challenge than in the past. Looking at the positions at the center, there's 70.5 total staff positions. More than half of those are direct care line staff providing services for youth. Fiscal year 2020, we have a $5.8 million budget, and the facility was certified by the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice in 2018. License capacity is 70 beds, but in 2016, it was reduced to 46 beds, which is their occupational capacity right now. Current staffing level is for 42 residents, and the average daily juvenile population is 20 to 25. And my guess is, if it's anything like other facilities throughout the country now, due to COVID, that daily population may be even lower than when these statistics were gathered. Intake includes screening for mental illness and substance abuse. It looked like like the facility does a really thorough screening process at intake, making sure that youth coming in are screened for the mental illness, suicide assessment, substance abuse, and all those things that really need to happen so that the staff know what kind of issues kids are coming in with. All living areas and rooms have natural light and the rooms are decorated. I had the ability to be on site last October, interviewing staff, youth, and parents. And one of the things I noted that even though it's a relatively older facility, there's been a lot of attention to having some normalization. We'll talk about that a little later. But kids' rooms, if they earn a higher level, they can decorate them and have more of a home-like feel. And that was obvious throughout the facility. And juveniles attend school in classrooms dedicated to education. Some facilities have education services in multi-purpose areas, and teachers have to teach in non-traditional kind of classrooms without the necessary equipment. So one of the things that we noticed on our walkthrough is, they're adequately equipped classrooms. The facility has a level system used to encourage pro-social behavior. Even beyond that, the challenge behavior management program, which the level system is part of that is really one of the exemplary kind of programs in detention, because right now the prevailing trend is more therapeutic environments, more teaching as opposed to more of a punitive type of environment. So the challenge behavior management program is really something that I think the facility is right on target in providing for the kids. Common areas very colorful and contain comfortable furniture. They're not your typical home kind of couches, but they are. It is colorful and the furniture is appropriate. Juveniles eat in the common dining room. Some facilities are still serving kids their meals in their rooms and having the kids in their rooms for a long period of time. But this facility has a nice dining area, and the kids can eat in a reasonable area. Outdoor recreation areas, very critical that kids get out and they're able to get some fresh air and work off some of their frustrations. So I think generally the facility environment, even though it's relatively old, I think it's a positive environment. I was really impressed with not only the number of programs that are offered at the facility, but the quality of the programs. I talked a little bit about the school, the residents, the youth, and the parents, the family members that I talked with were very, very positive about the educational program. The staff were as well. Another program that seems to be something that helps with the budgetary issues is the community placement program through DJJ, which is an alternative to state Commonwealth placement in the training school facility. The Central Admissions and Placement Unit, which is a 3-week program where kids can be assessed prior to going to the long-term facility. New Beginnings program is a program that's an alternative to placement with DJJ. And it's something that kids can actually stay in their home area and receive some treatment as opposed to going to the long-term correctional placement. Aggression replacement training, or ART, that's a cognitive behavioral intervention that's used frequently in the programs, not only detention, but residential programs throughout the country. It teaches kids how to manage their anger, find different ways of diffusing some of those feelings, and make better choices that are going to result in better consequences. There's a council for boys and young men, that was impressive. Girls Circle, that's another program that's used throughout the country that sees a lot of positive benefit. And then the Capital Youth Empowerment Program, which is volunteers coming in to provide services for the youth. And then the Pregnancy Prevention Program. All in all, in addition to the behavior management program, it was impressive what was being provided to the youth. And throughout we went into this project, and I started at the beginning and through October of last year. But there were two options that we were really looking at. Number one, keeping the facility open and implementing cost containment strategies. That was one of the options. And the second option, close the facility and contract for beds at another detention center. Prince William County facility requires infrastructure improvements and has limited program space. And they really had no interest in taking any of these youth. Loudoun County facility, also limited capacity in the existing facility, and they're planning to build a new facility, but they also stated they wouldn't be interested in taking Northern Virginia kids. Fairfax County looked like maybe it was going to be one of the better options in providing services to other jurisdictions. But in April of 2020, apparently they decided that wasn't something that they would be willing to do, which left option one. And quite frankly, and I agree wholeheartedly with the mayor and the chair that there's some good things happening in the facility, and to be able to keep it going and even improve upon it would be a good way to go. I think Mr. Eichenlaub is going to take this one, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Wayne. So this slide gives you some sense of what it costs per day per juvenile to operate the facility. And we wanted you to have some sense of what it costs at other facilities around the Commonwealth. And so in the second column there, you can see that the cost to operate Fairfax on a per day per child basis is of roughly $889. And the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center is in a relatively close second at about $853. As you get out into more rural areas, the cost comes down. For example, at Roanoke Valley, it's $412 per juvenile per day. If you look all the way over on the right at the last column, you can see that the biggest driver of the costs difference is the staffing expenses. And so at Fairfax, it's about $294,000 per year per resident. And then for the detention center in Alexandria, it's about $249,000.
When you say staff expenses, is that salary or is that something else?
Salary and benefits. And I'll provide a little bit more information on that in a couple slides. Thank you.
Okay, also as part of the study, we definitely wanted to take a look at the facility's strengths and also some challenges that face the facility. One of the things that came across clearly, the center enjoys widespread community support. There was no doubt that the community supports the center. There was a lot of positive feedback about what programs are being offered and the impact. Some of that community support came from the actual parents of the children in the facility. When I held one of the parent groups, and despite some harping a little bit, but generally the parents were very, very impressed with the services that their kids were getting at the facility. The commission empowers center leadership to make improvements and implement cost containment strategies. I read a lot of commission meeting reports, doing the research, and it was obvious in reading those reports that the center had the support of the commission, and the commission would actually come to the center and have some of their meetings at the center, so they could actually go and take a look at what was going on in the facility. That doesn't happen very often in other jurisdictions. So I think. Go ahead.
Sorry, hold on. Mr. Seiferding.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sir, you talked about community support. Could you share some of the underlying data about the support, numbers, stats?
Don't have any stats, but interviews were conducted with community participation, community members, and I believe that's in the final report. But the input that we got from the community members was generally very positive.
How are we defining community members in the report?
Oh, I don't have that information. Maybe
Wayne, I can add a little bit. So when we were doing our work last fall, we did 3 community forums at which members of the community, family members, residents were able to offer us input. But in addition to that, we reached out to members of judges in the 3 communities, law enforcement in the 3 communities, public defender's office in the 3 communities, and we did phone interviews, in-person interviews. Wayne and I both did these personally, and that's how we got input from the communities across a broad spectrum of representatives. And that's the basis for our suggestion or perception or conclusion that the detention center has support.
Right.
Mr. Eichenlaub, just for a second, I understand that several kids, detainees, are from the District of Columbia, a significant number. I believe it's about 50%. Did you reach out to representatives, or did the study involve their community as well?
We did not reach out to the district.
Okay, thank you.
So these numbers, how should we qualify this finding, or how should we characterize this finding that we have community support? Do we say it's statistically significant, or is just more of a general census of certain population, or is more qualitative, I think?
More qualitative. Okay. We couldn't put a statistical number to it, so I'd say it's more qualitative. But I will also add a caveat that there were some individuals who advocated for no juvenile detention and the abolishment of a juvenile detention center. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end.
Can I tag on to Councilman Seifeldin's question? With the outreach, I do appreciate that you guys heard from the families and some of the parents. Did you do any outreach to any of the nonprofits that essentially work with these children? Or
We did. Yes, we.
Okay, because you just mentioned the law enforcement and the judges, and I don't know if they directed you to some of the nonprofits. I don't know if you could expound on that a bit.
I can't off the top of my head. We did reach out to some nonprofits. And the other thing I would add is we had an online survey posted for, I think, about 6 weeks altogether, so that anybody who wanted to offer any input whatsoever was able to offer feedback online.
Was the intention of putting the survey online to get a statistically significant responses from respondent, or is it kind of just general to the public? What measures did you take to reach out to the community in Arlington, Falls Church, Alexandria at large, outside of the communities who are immediately impacted or in the facility? And was
Right.
it sort of, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would underscore, we were charged in this study with analyzing the facility and making recommendations about keeping the center open and or going to another jurisdiction. This is not a social science-based research study, so I understand and get why you would want some real hard data, but that's not what this study is. So I can't offer that.
I understand, but if I could add one thing to it, at least for Alexandria, we have to respond to our community, which includes whether we want to keep it open or not. And for order for us to do that, we need to understand what our community is asking for. So the impression that our community and obviously Arlington and Falls Church would be questioned about this, so we can look at the data and then make a determination as to the next steps. So I think that was within the parameter of what you were tasked, unless you were specifically told you don't need to do that, because we do represent the people and we make decisions indeed, but based on information from experts like yourself. So I don't know what parameters we gave you, or if you were limited, which if that was the case, I completely understand. It has happened before from our end. So we may need to take that with our staff, but were you limited in any way not to the community at large?
I wouldn't say we were limited, but the RFP specifies very explicitly what we were asked to do. And I would invite you to take a look at that.
No, I get that too. Sorry, Councilman Seifelman, can I jump in with you?
Councilman Gary.
When you say that you're soliciting, input from the community, I mean, is there a place in this report where I could find what nonprofits you spoke with?
I don't know that we identify the specific nonprofits in the report, but I'm sure we have a record of it and we could follow up with that if you'd like.
Well, I mean, that would be kind of crucial because, I mean, if you're going to say that you got input from certain groups, I mean, I'm not saying that you guys didn't, but it's misleading if you say one thing and then it's like, well, where is it, right? So I know that you guys have an 189-page report. So if it's somewhere in here, I'm more than happy to browse through it and see where the comments came from. But, you by saying that you were soliciting comment from the community, you're kind of opening this whole door to, okay, well, what kind of outreach did you do and who did you talk to specifically?
Mr. Mayor.
Let me go back to the request that you just spoke about. Sorry, Ms. Pepper, I'll continue and hand it over to you. Correct me if I misunderstood you, sir. Are you saying based on the word of this contract, with the parameters of coming back to us with whether we want to keep this open or close it, that you did not feel it was necessary to engage with the community to make that determination what the community wants? Because I don't know how you can say this is a social study.
No, I didn't say that at all.
I think if I understood you correctly, you said that we're asking for a social study. I'm asking for actual data to see what our communities want from this particular facility and how we want to move forward with it. And I believe that's what you were tasked with. But you referred me back to the request in which the contract was awarded to. So maybe let's talk about that and tell me what was in it.
We're here. Councilman Seibaldin, rather than get into a long discussion with everyone here about the parameters of the RFP, which I think we can get a copy of and have a discussion about whether that was the scope that everyone wanted, why don't we let them try to get through the remainder of the presentation and then get into kind of a discussion to the two bodies about how we move forward. I want to make sure we have time for that conversation. So I understand what you're trying to get at, but we can get the RFP out and have a look at that and talk about whether this is responsive to those findings. So I'm not trying to cut that off, but I want to try to get them through the presentation so we can get the discussion of the two bodies. Councilwoman Pepper, did you have a question?
Yeah, but I don't know if you want to wait. But here's what my question is. It can be answered quickly. Just as a matter of information, did I hear you say that the children themselves, because they're older children, some of them, were they asked, what do you think of the workings of the programs? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
And you had what? They all thought they were terrific.
No.
No.
And I wouldn't expect that, but I think a good number of the youth that we talked to were positive about the programming and the staff involvement and the more of the caring presentation that the staff used. Obviously, not everybody were happy campers at the facility, and that's to be expected. But generally, they were pretty positive about the behavior management program and the way the staff worked with them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm tracking time here. If we can try to get through these next couple slides pretty quickly so that we can get to the discussion. As you can see, there's a lot of pent up discussion that wants to occur here. And so I think everybody, likely this is a group that does their homework. So I think both sides read the report and is aware of the findings. So let's try to highlight the final few slides and then we can get to the discussion.
Okay. Challenges, definitely the center has numerous strengths as they were listed on there. Also, one of the challenges is serious offenses and complex behavioral health issues. Talked a little bit about that earlier. And one of the things that came up in some of the discussions with staff is we need more mental health services provided to the kids that would help them do their job better than they are now. So that was bullet number 3. Ike basically commented on the high cost per day. That $853 a day is extremely high for detention nationwide. The center's age and design does not lend itself to normalization. And normalization basically refers to a living condition that closely approximates living in the community. Obviously, if you're locked up in detention, you can't have that true home-like experience. But to the degree that the facility can make things a little warmer, it has an impact on resident behavior. That really makes a difference. And the center is in need of capital improvements. I'm sure the board and the city hear about those fairly frequently. It's an older facility. It needs some care from time to time. And then the community members opposed to any form of juvenile detention. Ike mentioned that, and I think Reggie is going to follow up with that. So with that, I think definitely the facility has more strengths than it has areas of challenge. Thank you. Mr. Eichenel?
In terms of the budget, as I mentioned previously, salaries and benefits are the biggest driver of costs in running a detention center. 3.6 million roughly for salaries, 1.2 for benefits. Your total operating expenses are about 5.8 million. Revenues represent a subsidy from the Department of Juvenile Justice and also funds that are provided to operate the CAP and CPP programs. And so when you subtract revenues from the money that the state, the Commonwealth provides from operating expenses, your cost per day per child is about $652 that the 3 jurisdictions pay. Next slide. I'm not going to go, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into great detail here. Suffice it to say that we did offer some recommendations about how to bring some costs down, as well as operate more efficiently in accounting and HR. And then we also recommend that the vacant unit known as Unit 7 on the upper floor of the detention center could be used for some type of program or activity. Go ahead, Prasan. And so for fiscal year 20, please recall we did our work there last fall, at which time fiscal year 20 was forward-looking. We offered recommendations for reducing costs in the amount of $372,000. And we recommend or suggest that the detention center work with the state to bring in another program, which would help offset costs. And with those offsets and reductions in costs, we believe you could bring your cost per day down to $545 instead of about $652. Next slide. And then this slide shows what each jurisdiction contributes to the facility and how much use each jurisdiction provides at the facility. And so you see there that over the last 3 years, on average, Alexandria has had 4,176 childcare days, 4,197 childcare days, and Falls Church places juveniles there much less frequently, only 91 days on average over the last 3 years. Alexandria contributed about 1.8 million, Arlington about the same, 1.8 million, and Falls Church 39,000. And if the efficiencies and reductions were implemented that we recommended, we believe Alexandria and Arlington could bring their costs down by almost $300,000 a year, and Falls Church could save about $6,400. Next slide. Dr. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Ike, and thank you, Wayne. We'll get through these final thoughts pretty quickly, so we can open it up. But these are several conclusions that the report believes are important to share with you this evening. First, nearby juvenile detention centers are not viable options. I think we've heard comments about that, but we wanted to make sure that this was an important part of where you all might be thinking about for the future of this facility. The Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center can reduce costs. Should you be looking at cost reduction and saving more money with regard to the facility without compromising many of the programs and services that are offered at the institution. We think they do just an amazing job there. So that is, I think, fodder for some other reviews in the future. Should be looking at cost containment. A majority of the stakeholders and community members voiced their support for the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center. And, for me, this was meant to be an anecdotal review, not a statistically correct one. The only way I think you're going to get really a statistically correct assessment of whether or not people like or don't like the center is to have a vote. and to get, and given the 3 jurisdictions involved, I think you're talking about a major expense and a major complication. We do believe, and there are, the whole idea of having community participation. One is to make sure that, they can't come back to you as public officials and say that they have not, been involved, that they have not had an opportunity to voice their opinion. Well, they have through some of the calls that were made. They have had the opportunity to voice their opinions at the community events that were held. I had opportunity to hear from citizens and persons who were office holders alike. And based on the feedback that we got from some of those events and from some of the calls and from some of the interviews and focus groups, that it is our professional assessment that many persons agree with the mission of the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center. Yes, you could probably have taken some of that and developed the statistic, but whether or not it would have been statistically sound or not is debatable. Space is available at the Northern Virginia Juvenile Detention Center for repurposing, should that be something all of you as public officials choose to look at. It is a complex facility. It is an aging facility, but it is available for other options should you look at what you would like to think about for the future of the complex, of the compound. Some community members advocated for actually closing the center and eliminating the Juvenile Detention Center altogether. We heard some of that at some of the public events. But it's not unusual. Here in Ohio, just the other day, there were protests from persons who are wanting to close the adult prison system. I mean, we're talking about, institutionalizing, all people in correctional facilities. And we know that's an unrealistic thing to do, but that doesn't stop persons, and they're entitled to their opinion regarding how they see the future of correctional operations in this country. And there are persons in your jurisdictions who believe that juvenile detention should be altogether done away with. We also recommend that the Annie E. Casey Foundation, through their Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, it would be a great partner for the center. This center is designed to help develop networks to help build a better and equitable juvenile justice system in the United States. The Annie E. Casey, if you aren't familiar with it, has been one of the major movers and shakers in the United States of helping to design juvenile justice systems that work across the country. So, Mr. Mayor, Chair, I turn the presentation over to you, for however you want to proceed from here.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Let's, why don't we start, I want to give our friends from Arlington a chance to start, since they were more respectful and allowed the presentation to conclude. So I'm gonna let them go first, and then we'll come back to my friends in Alexandria. So my colleagues in Alexandria know that the way to get my attention is jazz hands. So practice your jazz hands. County Board Member Crystal, do you want to go first there? Or were you just practicing your jazz hands there?
Yeah, Mayor Wilson, thank you so much. Thank you to the Moss Group, to our counterparts from Alexandria, and certainly to our staff who've also been working very hard on it. I actually want to begin with a question for our court services directors and perhaps for our respective county and city attorneys. First, let me commend you. The fact that those numbers have gone down so precipitously is a result not just of national trends, but of dedicated hard work to providing alternatives so that when juvenile court judges hear cases, they have somewhere else constructive to send youth that is not detention. And that is really a credit to the work that you do in both of your units. So thank you. I want to just be clear about what the alternative would be here. What would happen if Alexandria and Arlington had neither a juvenile justice center or detention center nor an agreement with another jurisdiction to house our youth? This may be a question for our attorneys. I'm not certain if we're required by statute in the Commonwealth to have such a center. I think there might be a desire to make that move towards zero detention by simply closing down this facility. Where would that leave us, though, with regard to Virginia law or JDR courts?
Earl Conklin, the Court Service Director. I am very, I would say I'm not sure about the answer to that question, but what I would say is the courts have the authority to place youth in custody, and that would put the onus, I believe, on our Sheriff's Department or someone else to whom they would go to make arrangements for them. It does not mean that the judges could not order detention of a youth. So it would create a conflict between the courts and the jurisdiction in which detention may be ordered, and there would not be a place for youth to go. But they would be placed in someone's custody should the courts order detention.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin. I find that really helpful, and I think there are probably often times that we as local elected officials chafe at the restrictions of our jobs. And I think this is a really important one, that we cannot end the placement of youth or the ordering of youth to juvenile detention as we determine the future of this facility. Given the number of us, while I have the floor, I'd love to ask one other question, and then I will let it lay while others surface theirs. Certainly, I am interested, as I suspect others on this call, on our board and on your council are, in pursuing that vision of zero youth detention. And so I wanted to dig in a little bit about the idea of co-locating therapeutic services, right? Be they mental health services, family services, or others. We know that we have a tremendous need for mental and behavioral health emergency beds for youth in our jurisdiction, and I suspect in Alexandria as well. I know that it is not without precedent. For example, King County and its pursuit of a zero youth detention model has a facility that is both detention and increasingly being used for family supports and therapeutic services. On the other hand, I can also imagine that's really problematic to house youth who are receiving treatment with youth who are in detention. And so before we consider that as a potential solution for the future of this facility, I'd really welcome the opportunity to hear from the Moss Group in your professional opinions and your review of best practices. What are opportunities, if there are, and what are the things that could be pitfalls or even reasons to not pursue a co-location model of therapeutic and detention services for juveniles on the same campus?
Wants to take that question? Don't all fight.
I think that's got to be somebody at the Moss Group. I don't know that anybody else has the subject matter.
Dr. Wilkinson, you want to start that one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, liability would be one. I mean, persons who are adjudicated, and mixing them with persons who are not adjudicated could be a liability, for the jurisdiction, for one. Two, when you're developing programs, not all models work for the same groups of people. So because if you're in a facility because of a developmental disability, intellectual disability, or a mental health challenge, is not necessarily the same as if you've had, criminal histories. And again, the liability would be there. I think, sight and sound separation. There are rules from the, federal government, from the OJJDP, that governs how persons who are adjudicated as juvenile should be governed. So there there are a lot of hurdles, to get over for. You can co-locate facilities if there is the right kind of separation, but to mix those persons in the same kind of classes or program services would be a major problem, I think.
You're already doing some co-location for residential placements, state youth in the facility, as well as local detention. So to that degree, you're already doing a lot of services on campus. I would agree with Dr. Wilkinson that when you start doing a mental health facility, it may be something that would have to be on the campus, but not part of the secure unit. So then you'd have more of a one-stop shop for services, but you're already doing a lot of that. Also, the Unit 7 issue, that's a non-secure unit. I think one of the things that could be provided in that unit is maybe some outpatient services. I think the report went into a lot of different ideas for that came from the community, that came from the staff at the facility, what that unit could do. But when you start commingling, a committed population or a court-ordered population with the other population, it could be trouble.
Board Member Crystal, do you have a follow-up, or is that good?
No, thank you. I think there's probably a great deal of research that would need to be done if we wanted to pursue that direction, but that was a helpful initial start. Thank you.
All right, one more question from the better behaved elected body, and then we'll go back to Alexandria. Chair Garvey.
I'd like to just follow up actually with Ms. Crystal's questions, which she's actually asking everything I was thinking of asking, but just one follow-up. If we did, definitely, I think more study would be needed for deciding what we might co-locate. How much time would a study like that take? Just like an estimate, sort of, are we talking 6 months, a year, more than that?
I think everything is skewed now with COVID-19, and because I think you would really, have to, kind of respect that, starting out. And then I think, before you can even start, I think looking at Northern Virginia, we might have to do kind of an environmental scan of, is there anything already out there that looks like what you're wanting to achieve? And then see how adaptable it might be. But then it's the logistics, I think, of staffing it and so forth. And Ike, I think you have some thoughts about that.
In terms of how long something like that might take, maybe this study could be used for comparison purposes in terms of length of time. We actually kicked this off in early August of 2019, and most of the work was completed by December of 2019. So we did this in about 4 months and had a completed report in January. So this was about a 5 or 6 month effort, if that helps.
No, it doesn't. I guess what I had in mind was, I think we have, between all of our staffs and our two jurisdictions, a pretty good sense of what our needs are. I think there are a lot of mental health needs. So it seems to me to be a matter of taking those and then figuring out how they might fit into it. So I wasn't thinking there'd be a whole lot of in-person kind of stuff, but that was sort of what I was wondering. So thank you. That's helpful. I don't know if any more of my colleagues have got questions, Mayor Wilson.
I haven't seen any jazz hands here yet. I see Mr.
We will. I will say we will want to do some summing up at the end.
Oh yeah. So. Well, we got a lot more to go. Board Member De Ferente.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson and colleagues. First, I just want to thank the two court services directors. I know there's been a ton of work in addition to the Moss Group, and Ms. McNair. I must say that in visiting the facility, it seemed to be with the best practices of working with youth that I've seen. Just to thank you to Ms. McNair in particular. I do have a question about slide 8. It's about budget. And it concerns the number of staff that we have. 70 staff. We have about a 70% reduction in the number of beds. being used over the course of the year. And I think this is, I'm not sure if this is Dr. Wilkerson or who on the Moss Group team. Our average is about 40 or so, less than 40 youth, I believe. There are about 8 or 9 Arlington youth typically in the facility, and perhaps as many Alexandria and maybe a few from Falls Church. From a investment standpoint, could we better target our resources? Could we produce additional resources to help juvenile youth in diversion or in mental health by further reducing the number of staff so that we're not still providing for 70 beds? Or have I read slide 8 and the report incorrectly?
Actually, I believe that slide indicated that right now it's staffed for 42 youth. So you've already done some trimming on that, and I believe there's a staffing analysis section. It wasn't my section, but there is a staffing analysis section that talks about deployment of staff and coverage and that sort of thing. So it's hard to really say X number of staff are needed for X number of kids, because you have to have a certain number per pod, per unit. So it becomes a little more elaborate in terms of finding out how many staff you really need. And Mr. Eichenlaub, sure. I think, did you have a slide or something on the staffing issues?
We did recommend a number of positions that we thought could be reduced. And I would remind everybody, our data collection occurred over a year ago, when the population was between 20 and 25. And I think it has the number of juveniles who are placed there on any given day has gone down a little bit since then.
Got
it. Mr. Ferranti, I would, offer a bit of caution that sometimes it's difficult to, make certain kinds of reduction in force decisions, commensurate with the number of, in this case, juveniles who might not be there. There's a difference between you reducing the cost by the average cost and then the marginal cost. You can sometimes do more harm, if you reduce by an average cost rather than the marginal cost, because you need to still make sure you're providing, the right services. And the only way you really get to major cost savings is to close, units of the compound and so forth. So there are ways that you can do it, but it's not necessarily as simple as it might sound.
Sure, I am mindful that I was in the Arlington community feedback session where a number of employees were there, in addition to Ms. McNair, and I respect the professionalism and the work. I also noted the mental health, full-time mental health person that would be important. But between 42 and 20 is a significant number of of children. So I'm not actually hoping to save money. I'm hoping to figure out how we could best invest money to address the needs. And so that's, 42 to 25, you need a mental health professional, and that's an addition. I would just submit respectfully that resources could be spent differently. And mindful of time, I will say that the comments earlier of Mr. Aguirre and Mr. Cephaldin, if I've got the pronunciation, Mo, of your last name, I won't hold you to it if you don't hold me, but page 15 and 16 of the middle of your reports refers to stakeholders that don't seem to me to deeply include the members of our community. And it feels to me as though there's conclusory, as though we're leading to a conclusion, much like there was a judge in the Arlington meeting who said, let's keep this going. And there were employees, but the community that was there, in my judgment, majority, and Ms. Garvey may have a different take, the majority had concerns. So I'll yield the floor. I would say that the second bucket of the work here was about the trajectory of the facility. And halfway through that trajectory, I think there was a vastly different conclusion that we had from Fairfax. Given that 49% of the youth live in DC, and given that there are a couple of places in addition to Fairfax, I guess I'd submit, I'm not sure we did the research to know in detail whether Fairfax was a viable option. I guess maybe the question is, what point did the information from Fairfax come back that they weren't interested? Did we get to that part of the work or not?
So let me jump in here for a second, because I'm probably more privy than almost anyone on this as to the Fairfax's current posture. So I've had a lot of conversation with the chairman of the board of Fairfax about this very issue. And I think it's fair to characterize that the staff of Fairfax County has conveyed, both in this study as well as to our respective county and city management, that they have no interest in additional kids coming to their facility. And I think that is a message that has come from the board. I have had a lot of conversation with Chairman McKay on this issue, and as recently as last week, he allowed me to convey in this meeting that the door is not closed, he said, but the hill is steep. And so I think they have some resistance for a variety of different reasons to bringing kids from other jurisdictions into their facility. I would say, and I think you can see it in this report, that they have plenty of capacity in that facility. And we historically worked together. Fairfax was part of this facility. So I think there is a logic to potentially working together again, either way, quite honestly, given the way the capacity is. But the door is not closed, but that's, I think the report is accurate that Fairfax has conveyed in the past that they are not interested in this. So I think if we wish to change that decision, I think that is probably more of a political operation that the 12 of us, is that right? Did I do the math right? The 12 of us we probably need to work on rather than our staffs. So I'll leave it at that. So moving back on the fun side of form, I'll run for a second. Let me ask a couple quick questions and then a longer question. So this is probably for Mr. Conklin and Mr. Mackey. So here's the three lightning round questions. Can you give me the average length of stay currently in this facility? I saw the slide that had a breakdown of how the three jurisdictions are using the facility. Can you break that down now that we have federal and DJJ kids there? Can you give us what is that? What percentage of the capacity are they using? And then we've had a lot of discussion about, and I know the report talks a great deal about this, about where the kids live and the access to families and things like that. And I've heard some comments about a large percentage living in DC. Can you give us a general idea of the residency of the kids that are in this facility or generally in this facility? And then I have a longer question for everyone else. So
I can begin, Mike, if you'd like. The average length of stay last year for local kids was 23 days. And for Arlington placements, and Alexandria may be somewhat different, but 49% were residents of the District of Columbia, and 32% were residents of Arlington, and I believe 10% were residents of Maryland. So the majority of the placements, the single group placements, are kids from the District of Columbia.
Wow.
Janitha, Ms. McNair might be able to better answer the question about how many of the state youth placed by the state are there as well.
Ms. McNair, you want to field that one?
Yes, sir. So on any given day, about 45% of our population right now is the state-run programs, the CAP program and the CPP program. So that has definitely raised our population. I would also like to offer that for some reason, in the 3 years that I've been here, this has been the year when our judges in our jurisdictions have started to utilize our New Beginnings program, our 6-month longer term program, a lot more instead of sending our kids to DJJ for treatment. So we have 5 children in that program today. And that is really, we're usually averaging 1, 2, or 3, but they're utilizing those 10 beds a lot more efficiently than we previously have.
Thank you, Ms. McNair. Mr. Mackey, do you want to answer for the Alexandria numbers?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we would be similar in terms of the use relative to youth who either live in the district or Maryland. For example, right now we have 7 youth in the detention center from Alexandria, 4 of whom live outside the Alexandria area in DC or Maryland. I would echo what Ms. McNair said about the CAP and the CPP program as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mackey.
Yes, sir.
So Dr. Wilkinson, I guess now a larger question, and this gets to kind of I think the questions that Chair Garvey was talking about the facility itself. So I guess, if we decide to go down the route of co-locating other uses on this site, you talked in the report a lot about the age of the facility and what it was built for and what it wasn't built for. I guess give us some more color on the adequacy of the facility, particularly if we're looking at uses on the site that may be primarily not secure detention, which is what it is primarily used for. I mean, I guess said another way, should the conversation be that if you want to explore some of these other uses, the jurisdiction should be coming together and saying, we're gonna scrape the site and build a new facility that provides a variety of different uses. Is that what you guys are saying from a facilities perspective, or I guess give me some more background on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm going to defer to Mr. Eichenlob and Mr. to start out, the response to your question.
So I would offer that we recommend that the environment could be normalized, which Mr. Liddell mentioned earlier, and that would take some architectural changes and some retrofitting. And Ms. McNair and the commission, I believe, already explored hiring an architectural firm to come up with a plan or some way to get that process started. But I think that's a good first step. And I want to underscore again, you've heard it and seen it in the report, Unit 7 offers an opportunity for co-locating some services. So I think those are the first 2 places where I'd start.
I agree with that.
Okay. Other questions from my colleagues on the Alexandria side? Councilman Aguirre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, thank you for the more details from the Fairfax County side. I had a very similar question to Board Member DeFerranti in terms of, what was kind of holding back Fairfax, or what was some of their thoughts on this. So that's good to know, and potentially having some more conversations with them. A quick comment for the Moss Group, and then a question. So, it's not a matter of statistics, right? Going back to what I said earlier, and Mr. DeFerranti touched on this as well. When you say majority of stakeholders, when you say community members voice support, I mean, if there's 10 people in the room and 7 of them work for the court systems or employees, then, that's good to know, because then I know how to kind of take that information in. But if I don't know that, then I don't know what to think. So if there are more specifics within the larger report, if you please point that out, or if you have information that you can follow up with us, I would definitely want to see that. Same thing with focus groups and whoever you're considering as a community, just to have some more detail as to who exactly we're dealing with. And so my question, I was looking at page 74 of the larger report of the 189-page PDF that we have. And one of your recommendations is the adjustments with full-time employees. It's a cost savings of almost like $500,000. But on the shorter, 20-page slideshow that we saw just a little while ago, it was only a cost savings of about $300,000. Was there pushback? What kind of happened with that recommendation in terms of losing 6 folks on the administrative side? And then the second question, in terms of the units, because a point very well taken, right? You can't just judge the staffing by how many kids are in there, right? It's security in the units and working on overtime. So is there any possibility to the repurposing question where a unit might be less secure because of the children or the program that's taking place in there, and so you would be able to reduce staff levels that way? If you could just kind of touch on a couple of those things.
Mr. Eichenlaub, you want to?
Yeah. I think I would have to go back and look at the report, but we recommended staff reductions in the amount of $372,000, as I indicated on the slide, and that should be consistent with what's in the report. And then we also recommended adding a CPP program, which has the potential to offset costs by another $223,000 for a total of about $600,000 in increasing revenues and reducing costs. So that's, to the best of my knowledge, what we're recommending to reduce costs. And in terms of the second question about making adjustments to staffing, I would go back to what Dr. Wilkinson said, which is there are fixed staffing needs, whether it's HR, the number of social workers you need to run a program, for example, or provide mental health services. So regardless of regardless of the number of the kids you have, you can make some adjustments, but you still are going to have fixed costs for having to run a detention center.
Right.
And last question, and just for your reference on your cost benefit analysis of the use of NVJDC, it's slide 7, I believe, under recommendations, 74 overall, that says, use the identified shift relief factor to meet security staffing. Oh, no, sorry. Second bullet, reduce the staff by 6.5 FTEs in the areas of administration programs. And that's the $537,000. Can you guys talk a little bit about overtime? I know overtime is always a sticky issue with a lot of different employers. So,
yeah, in every correctional facility I've worked in or supervised, overtime for security staff is typically an ongoing issue. When you factor in annual training requirements, there are national standards that require so many hours of training for every employee every year, including security staff, and staff are entitled to time off, sick leave, and other administrative activities. And so when you factor in the number of hours a staff member actually is off their post, it results in the need for.
Right. And that's a critical point that Carl Becker, another consultant with the Moss Group, did the staffing analysis and actually builds in, you have to build in relief factors. So you could say you need 2 staff for every pod for both shifts, but you have to have more people than that because of the relief factor. Because as Mr. Eichenlaub said, people take time off. They're not really working the 2,197 hours a year. It's less. So I think that's one of the things that goes into the staffing analysis that either was, I think it was provided, or it needs to be expanded upon?
Yeah, overtime is always a sticky wicky because the only cure for overtime sometimes is to hire more staff, but then you're paying more benefits, and then you got to do a cost benefit analysis to see whether or not you're paying more to have more staff than to go ahead and pay the overtime.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Aguirre. Councilwoman Jackson.
I thought Councilwoman Pepper was before me. She had jazz hands up before I.
You.
No, okay. All right.
Go.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Well, first of all, I want to thank the Moss Group and everyone coming together, and especially Director McNair. I had the privilege of taking a tour of that facility last year, and I thought how lucky that those kids were to be there. That also then leads into why I guess my concern, because I was also, excuse me, I also attended the Alexandria feedback session, and there were mixed reviews as I sat there and listened that night. But concerning the survey that was sent out, and I was trying to find it, I'm on page out of 189, 138 of this PDF that has the detention center survey that was sent out. And to Councilman Aguirre's point, it is disconcerting that we have the actual survey, but do we know how many surveys were taken? And can we get at least a breakdown, to Councilman Seifeldien's point, a breakdown of, who checked what box? Is there anything like that? Because it says it's anonymous, but that's just as a person, right? So their name's not on it. But, are we allowed to see what the actual comments were in these boxes so if it's anonymous, that's fine. No one's going to know who wrote these things because their name isn't on it. But it would be great if we could actually see what the feedback was at these feedback sessions that are not listed in the report as such. Is that possible?
Mike, I think that's for you.
Yep, we can take a look at that and get back to you.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of questions about trying to get some more detail on those surveys.
Yes,
Okay,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ms. Pepper?
Yeah. As I read through the materials, I really felt that the patient had already died and was very discouraged. So and that we really just don't have any good alternatives, and so we're trying to resuscitate it as best we can. But I really hope that whatever can be done to encourage Fairfax to help us out here. I don't know what those would be, because it sounds like we basically put all the pressure on we can, but let us not give up on that, because that would be wonderful. Anyway, I guess where I'm coming from, I do like the fast. It seemed to me that all of this, we can cut expenses here and there. I'm not so sure in the end that it would make that much difference, but this figure of 600,000, if that were possible, that might be worth the effort. But what I'd like to see is we really need more information as to what kind of repurposing we could do. Do I recall, I pass this thing all the time, but I can't remember. Are those high fences still there? Yes. I'm being told yes. Okay. That's not a very inviting thing. But anyway, I think that we need to know, we have to have more alternatives as to what can be done on that site. It may be that our best thing is to twist Fairfax's arm a bit here and maybe raise the site itself and build something that would have a lot of uses. because this one is certainly not helping us much. But having said all of that, I would like to just say that the programs that are being offered, maybe it's only for a handful of kids, but I must say every life counts and they're precious. And if we don't do something now, we may not have another chance, even in another year, because the children go on. So we need to do all we can with what we've got. And I'm very pleased with what we have here. So having said that, now let me go back and just say that this is a very old building, and it may be that what we have to do here is the kind of renovation and reconstruction might be so considerable to make it updated better. We really need more information about what kind of a cost that might be too, because as I say, I was really discouraged because I could see that this might be a really hard, it's going to be a hard decision one way or the other. Sorry, that's not very coherent, but you got the drift. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pepper. So, obviously we're not going to make final decisions here today, but I think we do need to come out of this with some direction for our staffs as to what the next steps are going to be. So at this point, if folks can start kind of offering up some options, some things that they want our staffs to explore, some actions that we can come out of here with, I think that would be helpful. Mr. Board Member Karen.
Mr. Mayor, if I might indulge you for 1 second.
Yes, Dr. Wilkins.
Certainly, I agree with your train of thought here, but our company president, Andy Moss, is on the line now, and she's got a few thoughts that she would like to impart, and then I think it would be great if you could go back to your agenda items. So if I could call on, if you don't mind, Ms. Moss.
Ms. Moss, we try to keep as brief as we can, though. So thank you.
Well, actually, I know you're very sensitive to time, and I'm under the Michelle Duhart number here in terms of where I came in. Just quickly, thank you for this. And what I just want to emphasize is the reason you hired the Moss Group is because we listen. And I really heard the concerns and questions about knowing more of the details. It's a project that has many aspects to it. But we will go back internally and take in your comments and work with our project directors on your side. But I just thank you for that opportunity. And we are very much excited about the creativity and reform norms that you have in your culture of looking at the best for youth. But I know you're tight on time, so thank you.
No, thank you very much. Board Member Karen Thomas.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, I had the opportunity to visit the center on Friday for the very first time. I want to thank Ms. McNair and Earl Copeland for having me there. It was very insightful. To me, there is absolutely no doubt this is a prison. This is not a daycare center. Even if you read, if you use, if the report uses this language, I believe that this is very clearly a detention center. To me, one of the biggest issues here is what needs to be done to get closer to what the slides call normalization, which I believe is critical to make this a truly exemplary and very effective installation. I believe that there is a lot that needs to be done, and the report itself admits that it's really difficult. So this has a translation into significant, potentially significant capital investment. And I would like to know, what we are talking about and what the options really are. Because I believe that this will, be an extremely challenging affair for all of us. And I don't believe that we need too much time to gather these data. Maybe, half a year, 6 months should be enough to have to give us an idea. As to the collocation, I have to say one of my most impactful takeaways was that and Ms. McNair, please feel free to correct me if I understood it wrong, but about half of your kids come from a trauma. So they are not half, almost everybody comes with trauma, having experienced violence. And about half of them are medicated because they have they're bipolar, or they have other psychological issues. This is already in the center. This is a center that it's structured as a prison, it functions as a prison, it feels like a prison. As good as staff is trying to manage that, it's still a prison. And this is really not helpful for these detainees there, and we're talking about juveniles, right? So we really need to think very carefully about how really the chain of service works there. I have the highest appreciation for the programs that are on there. I think that they are showing us the way forward, but we still have a lot to do and to rethink that the function of that center. And at the same time, I do believe that we need to continue to seek whatever opportunities with Open Doors with Fairfax there are. Without saying that this is a better center there, I have my very big doubts about this as well.
Well said.
Thank you. And if I can add, kind of building on that and maybe getting to an action that I think I want to see out of this is, it seems like there is more work that needs to be done as far as the facility itself. And I know both sides are having a lot of conversations about school facilities and things like that. And so we're used to doing these kind of test fits on sites and kind of understanding the adequacy of facilities and what options are there. I think it would be useful to get some of that done on this facility so that we know, if you wanted to incorporate, this kind of mental health services or something like that, this is what it would take. If we wipe the site, this is what the options were, just giving us some sense of kind of order of magnitude, what those options are and how much they might cost. I think that would be really helpful. And I would want to put that on the action list. Chair Garvey.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think for our sort of final sum up, I'm probably going to turn that over to Mr. Dorsey, who is our liaison. But before we get there, personally, I understand the desire to check out with Fairfax. There's a large part of me that really doesn't want to give over control of our children to Fairfax. I think it's really an incredibly well-run program given what we've got there. I think the facility, definitely, I like your idea, Mayor Wilson, about, doing some of those studies. I've seen some old, not very actually nice schools in our system from years ago when I was on the school board, incredibly transformed within architecture and windows and things, and it's just amazing what they can do. So, I set that aside. I'm very interested in doing that. But I would be interested in knowing if, Ms. McNair, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm so impressed with what you're doing there. I think you probably know better than anyone what the needs are for your facility and the young people who are there. But I would like to invite you to comment if there's anything sort of major that you think we've been missing in this discussion that you would like us to know. And I had one specific question for you, which was back to the issue of staffing and the idea that people do need some backup. And I know one of the recommendations was to eliminate the deputy director position. And I assume that you are a human being and that you maybe don't get to work every day and things come up that I would wonder what your thoughts were on eliminating that position, because that would affect you probably more than anyone. So one specific question for you, Ms. McNair, if you don't mind, and then a broader one, which you can decline to answer if you want, but if there's something you'd like us to know, I'd love to hear it.
Okay.
McNair.
Thank you. So let me get the easy part first, which is the positions. After we had the benefit of the conclusion of the study presented to us and being a member of the project team, as we started to have attrition here at the center, I focused on the recommendations made by Moss Group to be very conscientious about what positions we would fill and which positions we could move away from. And as it stands today, we have 49 positions working in this facility. Now, down from 70, and we have not been at 70 positions since this study started. And I'm not saying 49 is our magical number, but we have not been at 70. And some of the positions that they recommended that we look at moving away from, I've already frozen those positions with no intention to fill them. So I've started, because those are things I just didn't see that. And once I met with them and got some ideas about how we could really save money there, we did that already. So we're moving towards that with the positions. So I think the other question was more about what's happening in the center now. So let me say this. You know, I worked in a neighboring state and ran 7 of their 14 facilities over the past 15 years. I'm a correctional consultant. I work for the federal government. Well, I do consultation for federal reports as well as the American Correctional Association. And there is no way I can continue to work in this field unless we're doing hugely progressive work in detention. Our center looks like no other center in the state of Virginia. So you got to see a few programs, and we have in excess of 30 programs that our children have access to every day that's fundamentally sound as it relates to growth, adolescent development, helping our children return to the community successfully. So I know what we're doing, nobody else is doing. And while I am friends with the superintendents and the directors of the other facilities, they are my friends. Jason at Fairfax is my friend. I respect him very highly, but he is not doing what I'm doing, and he has no desire to do what we're doing here, right? I have seen the work. I've seen what we were able to do in Maryland. I audit across the country and see what else is happening. And I'm fully committed to, as long as I'm here and as long as we have children at this center, while I'm here, we're going to be progressive, and we're going to make sure that we're caring for the whole child, whether they're here 1 day or 21 days or longer, right? And so I just want to make my commitment to you that I am very aware of what our jurisdictions invest in the children. And every penny that's put into taking care of children here, I want it to be for the best for these children and their families. And so we're fully committed to doing that here. Whatever happens at the end of this, I know that our children are forefront, right? And so I will continue in that vein to make sure that every child here has access to the best practical services, their interactions with staff, how they're treated in this center. The physical plant is not my favorite. It wasn't when I toured this center, but that's what we have. So, you know, in 3 years, I've done everything I could, right, to change what it felt like in here, because what it looks like is what it looks like. I think were there an opportunity to improve the physical plant, we could do great things. Maybe we make a smaller 30-bed facility and focus on those children with these higher needs. We're getting children in here that do have mental health needs, that do have very high needs. And the staff here get training to focus on that child. We spend more money on staff training than almost any other center. And I cut costs in other areas so that the staff that are relating to these children, interacting with these children every day, are highly trained and are able to meet the needs of these children as frontline workers, right? So it takes, you know, what you've invested in these 3 jurisdictions. I think, you know, certainly under my leadership and with the commission that I work with, we have been fully committed to making sure that whatever we spend on the cost of children is for the betterment of children and families. We recognize that no one wants their children locked in a jail. Nobody does. Certainly neither do I, because I know treatment can happen for children who need to be detained in an environment that doesn't look like a jail. But unfortunately, this is what we have. So, you know, I think, you know, if given the opportunity to change what this facility looks like, we will be able to meet some of the needs you have. these children are not going to get the same services at Fairfax or any place else. And that might not be necessarily as critical, right? As they'll be safe and they'll get education. But normalization, I've already partnered with an architectural firm to come in here and give us some ideas of how we could use the current physical plant. What can we do to make it more normalized, right? Is there opportunity for that? Or would we have to raise the center and start again, right? So I'm working on all of that for the 3 jurisdictions which I serve every day for your children and all the children that are housed here.
Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thank you very much. And which is where, and I will let Mr. Dorsey finish up for us, but I think what you've got there going as a model, I've been so impressed with what you're doing, Ms. McNair. There is such a need for services for this population, for youth, and for a broader population, which we've met with mental health services. I think there's a need. I think we've got the resources. I think we've got the talent. I would like us to be a national model. I appreciate what you're doing, and that's the direction I'd like to go into if we could. So thank you so much for that. Appreciate everything you're doing. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Garvey, and thank you, Ms. McNair. Our youth are very lucky to have someone of your experience and passion working for them. All right, Mr. Seifeldien, were you trying to get in there?
I was. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and everyone for your thoughtful comments. I think generally the sense that I'm getting that we're all trying to do the same thing and trying to find the best way in doing it. So I think we're off to a great start that we have the same foundation. So we may differ as to how we want to get there. But Ms. McNair, I'm like everyone else, very thrilled with the programs that are there. I've read about other programs that could be implemented, but there's actually something that you just said that grabbed my attention, which is if given the opportunity, things can change. And I think if there's any place in the Commonwealth for things to change in a progressive manner and set a trend, these are the 2 jurisdictions, and these are the people here that will do that. So I understand there may be limitation, but I want to hear from people like you who are on the ground as to how we can get there and forgo these traditional models and the status quo that are not really helpful, and studies throughout show that. So I understand it's a financial need, but we need to hear from someone like you about how we can do it aggressively and put enough capital in it. Because we just can't sustain this. And as the numbers have shown in the trend, eventually we're going to have this discussion and cuts until it's fully closed. So we want to get ahead of it and maybe repurpose it to something else, yet providing the same services or even stronger services.
Ms. McNair.
So,
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Ms. McNair, you're up.
So I think, what you said, Councilman Seifeldien, I hope I say your name right. I'm sorry. We're already, right, really setting the benchmark for how many children are detained in this area. Leaps and bounds. Alexandria, Arlington Falls Church, you're ahead of the national curve, really, right? And so, sure, we have a big, clunky, old facility. So should we have something different? I've worked with higher needs children in Baltimore City in an old mansion that was repurposed for a facility. There were no locked doors, right? And so we still need detention, but we don't necessarily need detention to look like this. Unfortunately, that's an investment I'm not sure we're able to make here because it would be building something new. There might be something that exists already that could be repurposed and utilized for the amount of children that we bring to this center. I really don't know, but I have worked outside the box to create a different environment, right? And to work in a different environment with the same service needs. It just depends on what we have and what we're able to do. I'm fully committed to working with you to get more ideas, to see what we can do. I'm fully committed to that. I think we run the risk of losing control of what happens to our children when we send them somewhere else, and they'll be taken care of. Absolutely, I have no doubt about it. But will we take advantage of the fact that while they're there, we're getting their needs met, not just basic needs, right? But we're treating the whole child and family. So those are the things I'm committed to here. And as long as I'm here, that will be occurring for children and families here at this center.
I think I understand what you're saying. If I could push you a little bit, and I understand there are limitations and there are bodies and boards that you have to answer to, and certain information gets filtered before it gets to us. But again, the models, I'm not opposed to having children who are troubled or need assistance being housed in a place, but in different manners. And the commitment is, I'm willing to do it, you're willing to do it, I believe my colleagues here are willing to do it as well. We don't necessarily, from the political side, have the know-how to get there, but we know kind of what we want it to look like. And I came here today, and also when I reviewed the report, to look for that. And there were some suggestions in the report about other areas and other programs and how scientific they are, how well tested they are, or sometimes how isolated they are and work for a particular community. And I appreciate all that, and it's good, but I was hoping to find something like that today so we can talk to our community members, our constituents about, hey, we want to move to a different directions. And just to be frank, not beat around the bush, don't necessarily want the name detention to be associated with it. But again, what's in the name, right? As long as the services are there, I think we should be fine. So I'm making the commitment to talk to my colleagues, convince them, and even get constituent support to get behind whatever is necessary to get us to the most progressive way to treat those who need help. And I think this is the place, again, I would reiterate that. I just don't have the information before me or the proposal. So you and I can talk offline, and if there's a proposal or anything that you're aware of, that I'm more than happy to champion and push around my colleagues. And again, I understand also the limitations that you have as you have to answer to certain bodies and board, but you don't need to respond to that comment because it is what it is.
Thank you, Councilman Seifeldin. Board Member Dorsey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize. I'm going to have to speak and then move to another commitment that I'm running a little bit late for. But let me just say that I appreciate having this opportunity to meet with our friends and comrades in Alexandria. This partnership in this particular entity is going on 65 years. It's a tremendous way that we work together. And I recognize that it is not satisfying to come to the conclusion where we've had a study that indicates that we have a need for more study and more questions and more looks at data to be explored. But I can live with that because I think this study has revealed a couple of key things for us. One, that we do have in operation a facility that is meeting a lot of the best practices in the field of juvenile detention and trauma-informed service delivery. And Ms. McNair, we thank you for that because it's incredibly important, as regardless of how few kids we're serving compared to years past, as Councilwoman Pepper mentioned, each one is incredibly important. And so as you asked, Mr. Mayor, what might be some ways that we can come together for direction for our respective staffs, listening to the conversation as well as some other thoughts that I've had, it seems that we should ask our staff in the spirit of an audit where there has been a consultant who's delivered some findings for us, we should have a management response. In this case, our respective jurisdictions coming together to really fully dig into what has been recommended by our consultants and offering us perspectives and options moving forward. That we continue to challenge them, not because they're not meeting the goal, but because they've done such a great job. And as Councilman Seifeldin mentioned, there's still probably more opportunities for us to explore diversion and ways in which we can not actually have juveniles entering this facility, that we continue the work that Ms. McNair has on architectural modifications to what exists now. But as you, Mayor, mentioned, that we look at test fits, maybe alternative sites to figure out what would be the practical and capital considerations for a different type of way of detaining youth. And then, I think what's implicit in what we're all saying, this facility operates as part of a juvenile justice ecosystem, and we're pushing one lever here. There are many other levers that we're not, and maybe there's some room to see how we can bring all of those maybe into working, making sure that we're working at similar purposes. So that includes the home locales for every child who is detained from us, making sure what is awaiting for those children back at their home jurisdictions is consistent with furthering the services that they get at our detention center, that we have prosecutors and public defenders and judges all on board. So just continued conversation to figure out how we bring those into alignment. And then, I realize that the issue of Fairfax is an important one. If you can provide efficiencies through bringing all of these under one roof, I understand the appeal primarily from a cost perspective for all of us. But I'd also like to explore and have the experts tell us a little bit more about what would be the actual impact on the programs that you offer that rely on family engagement, and whether or not, if you can better quantify how those could be impacted if we achieved regionalization, with Fairfax or with other possibilities. And then lastly, I'll just say about that Fairfax regionalization, it solves a lot of problems for us, admittedly, for Alexandria and Arlington. I think for us to really figure out whether this is a viable option for us to spend a lot of time on moving forward, we have to identify what problems does it solve for Fairfax? And I have to say that I don't quite know at this point. So while I would agree with the mayor, it's not a dead issue by any means. I don't think we move forward on that issue until we figure out whether or not it solves any problems that makes it worth their while. So I apologize. I feel bad in having to leave the conversation because it's terrific, but thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. Those were actually very productive and I think forward-looking comments for us. So they helped do exactly what we needed to do, which was lay out the next steps. Other comments from either side of 4 Mile Run. Ms. Pepper.
Well, only quickly to say that I think that Ms. McNair has truly breathed life into the what I had seen as a body that had already died. So I'm really very interested in moving forward. I think the last speaker has already said many of the things that I would have said. So I won't continue, but I think that we're telling everybody we've got to have more information before we can move forward. And if obviously we're going to have another meeting at once we have some of this, but let's give them time to do that. And Fairfax, as much as I had hoped would be our answer, maybe it isn't. So I'm open to new ideas. Thank you.
So can we go to the two marks, our pair of marks, for a second? Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Jenks, do you guys feel like you have some sufficient direction for next steps from the two bodies, or there's something more that you're looking for?
I think we have a lot of good ideas. I think Board Member Dorsey laid out a very good set of kind of framing what we need to look at. I think the staffs, we get together and put all our notes together and come back with, this is what we heard, these are the next steps, these are the follow-ups, and this is how we would do that. That might be the next best step.
I agree.
All right. The two marks are on the same page. That's good. That's good to hear. All right. Other final comments from the electeds?
Just very quickly, Mayor Wilson, I appreciate you moving us forward. I think Mr. Dorsey covered a lot. I guess the two marks may clarify the timing. You had mentioned 6 months, and that has some appeal to me. There are some big questions. That's one thought. And another is, given the importance of family in a lot of the lives of the juveniles, I wonder if deferred disposition or some work with DC, given that almost 50% of kids in the facility are we believe are from DC, whether collaboration there might be helpful.
Okay. Any other comments from the electeds?
As chair, I probably should just say another thank you, Mayor Wilson. Thank you. This has been very helpful.
Yes, I agree. Councilor
Yeah,
Cyclone, did you want to say
appreciate it.
something there?
I did. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for their thoughts again, and the Moss Group for their presentation. I think a lot of things have been said. Just a side note on Matt's comment, I will be sending a memo to all bodies, Falls Church, Alexandria, and Arlington, with my limited knowledge of the subject, but really to summarize what I'm hearing from the community and what I believe I heard from some of you today. And maybe this can be a note for the managers to give us some options to this matter. And for me, it's close and repurpose. And there's a lot to explore there. And I think with Ms. Nair, the discussion that we just had may be helpful in guiding us towards that. So I want this to be an option in whatever next step we take, or whatever options are brought back to us to look into and discuss with our community.
Thank you, Mr. Seifeldien. To our two clerks, I understand we need to check and see if we got any public input that needs to be reviewed. Did we have any?
Mayor Wilson, we did not receive any comments from the public.
Thank you, Ms. Sitton. Sorry.
Mayor Wilson, I'm sorry, that is the same for Arlington. We have not received any written comments for this meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. All right. Any other comments from anyone? I echo Chair Garvey. I want to thank, first of all, our consultant partners, also both of our CSUs and all of our city and county staff who have worked on bringing this report forward and getting this conversation progressing. This is something that's been kind of incubating on both sides for quite a while. And obviously we still have a lot of work to do, but having these conversations I think are valuable and kind of crystallizing that work and the work that's ahead. So thank you all for being a part of this. And hopefully next time we do this, we will be in person. I think it's our turn. So on our side of the 4 mile run. And so we look forward to hosting you guys at some point. So thank you all. Stay safe. Have a good night.
Thanks a lot. Stay well, everybody. Nice to see you.